you mentioned that you gave the keynote to the Pit Bull, and one thing I want to spend some time on, or take some of your time on, is you're seated in our industry. You are a mayor. Talk a little bit about elections upcoming, the economic impact you think that'll have for investors, lenders. There's a lot of there's no shortage of unknown variables out there in the world, and I think this is a very interesting and tangent one. So could you give some insight there?
Sure. So yesterday's keynote speak from the Pitbull Conference was my analysis on the upcoming presidential and Senate campaigns, and then the impact of both Biden and Trump for the economy. And then I tied it in at the end for what we think that means for the private lending space. Now, that was an hour talk, so I'm obviously not going to do that here, but I'll summarize for you. First off, I don't remember a time in my life where the country's been as divided as it is today. It's quite incredible. It's concerning. We are not as divided the most in our country's history. You got to remember, we had a civil war. We had the 69, the 60s were way worse than it is today. So we have to keep that in mind, but we are definitely divided. I believe that the election is strictly a commentary on President Trump. I think this election is Trump versus Trump. I think Joe Biden is a good candidate. I believe he's an acceptable candidate in a lot of ways, but I don't think that this is about Trump versus Biden. I think this is, are we happy with the direction we're going in as a country, or are we unhappy and do we have to change? And that's what we're seeing in the polling that's going on. So as an elected official, I will tell you the one thing that no incumbent can beat is if there's a feeling of insecurity and the fact that a voter feels we're going in the wrong direction. Yeah. So, some people believe love Donald Trump, and he was the best in the economy, and the only thing that's happened to him was the COVID-19. And I'm okay with that. Some people feel that he mishandled COVID-19 and he's just not presidential enough for them. Okay. And those two voters are going to come together and decide, and decide the election. And that's what's going to happen. The ones who are against him are going to vote for Biden, and then Biden will have some of his other support, and then the rest will vote for Trump. Now, in 2016, the poll numbers were showing Hillary Clinton up by a substantial amount at the same single time. And it ended up Donald Trump pulled it out from an electoral college view. If you'll remember, when you elect the president of the United States, it's not a popular vote like every other election. It's the electoral college. And do you know how many numbers there are in the electoral college?
500 and something.
538.
538.
Exactly. So you need 270 to win the presidency. So there are about 8 states in play. Okay. And I have a list here, and I'll read them off for you so you know. And I'm going to read off the percentage that state is likely to decide the election, so you know the importance. Okay. So on election night, if you see this state pop, it has this percentage chance of deciding the election. So the number one state that will decide this election is Pennsylvania. It has a 26.9% chance of deciding the election. Wisconsin is number 2 at 14%. Florida, number 3, 13.9%. Michigan, 4, 11.3%. North Carolina, 5, 5.6%. Arizona, 6, 5.1%, and Nevada, 3.2%. Now, there are other states, but they're not as important. So I focused this talk into looking at those individual states. And I will tell you, they are competitive. They're very competitive now. And I will tell you this, I would tell you if the election was held today, I believe Joe Biden would win the election. But I will also tell you that looking at the rallies, and I'm going to talk about one other thing, and looking at the momentum, it's in Donald Trump's favor. Okay. And people say good candidates don't lose elections, they run out of time. So he has 13 days to capture as many votes as he can with this momentum. I believe he's behind, but I don't think he's substantially behind. So at the end of the day, we will be fine as a country with either one being elected. Okay, it won't matter. We're going to be fine. We're going to come together either way. We have to know that. The Senate, the House of Representatives is going to stay as a Democrat. So that's not going to be an issue. The Senate is up for grabs. Okay, for the first time in a long time. Now, I, for one, prefer the Senate to be an opposite party I don't want the president to have all three houses of Congress. So if Biden gets in, I want the Senate to be Republican. If Trump gets in, it could remain Republican or go Democrat. I don't care. I just don't want one party to have all three because there's certain agendas of both parties that really bother me, and I don't want that to be pushed through. Okay, so fair analysis.
That's reasonable.
And so at the end of the day, after I go through all this analysis about the economy, and I'll go through this real quick so you understand what's been going on. The big unknown for us is COVID-19, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's impacted us. I know you guys were shut down. It's impacted us. We were shut down. We were up and running early. You guys were up fairly early as well. But who knows what's going to happen if it's going to come back and how strongly it's going to come back. So the only reason why our stock market's at 28,500 or so, and the only reason why we're okay with a 7.9% unemployment rate is because the government has stepped up.
Yeah.
And they borrowed money and they put money into the system, which is okay during a catastrophic event. And so three things are going on. We got the Fed pumping in money as the central bank. We have taxes being adjusted and people receiving stimulus money, and we have government spending. So the only thing that's going to change under the two candidates is how much government spending. And this may, over the next 4 years, it may interest you that Donald Trump is looking to spend only $250 billion because he has $1 trillion down, but he's going to cut $750 billion in other areas. And Joe Biden contemplates spending $2 trillion. Now, the $2 trillion, if it's spent by the government, will carry us a long way next year. So the short term, it will be very similar to what it is now because the Fed has agreed to keep the interest rates very low until 2022. If that's the case, and people are willing to do transactions because they're comfortable because of the government stimulus, we will be fine with both. Our industry will be fine with both people elected presidents. The worst thing that could happen right now, though, is the government stops spending. Because I will tell you, and I described this yesterday, we're like we have big fat training wheel spike, and that's the government stimulus that's there. And we're riding over really rough road. If those training wheels come off right now, we're going to fall.
Yeah.
So they got to keep that on and keep doing it. Now, people are worried about the borrowing, and I get that. And there's some people who believe that borrowing is a mistake. Borrowing is a mistake, except if there's a catastrophic event going on like there is. So we have to keep the lights on and people employed to the extent we can and preserve our way of life. And we're going to have to pay back the money eventually. But the last thing I'll leave you with on this point is that interest rates are so low, the government is borrowing this money at next to zero. And the only thing we have to watch is inflation. And inflation is below 2%. And if all that remains true, we could keep borrowing without a consequence. Once it ticks up, we have to revisit it, and it's going to be problematic. But now's not the time to take the foot off the gas. We have to preserve everybody's positions where they are and keep the economy running until it could function by itself and we could take those training wheels off. So in short, very optimistic about the private lending space. Low interest rates, government stimulus will allow us to continue to do transactions. My one warning, you got to be careful about some of these cities. There is civil unrest in the cities, and there's been a movement out of them because of it. It's COVID and civil unrest. And the most important thing that anybody can do as a mayor is to keep your people feeling safe. Like you need to be safe. And if you're not safe, you're not going to be able to stay in that city. And you have to watch the values in the city because of that as lenders. And the second thing is all the government restrictions on foreclosure, forbearance, and evictions. So a lot of these fringe states, some of the blue states, have put restrictions in place that you can't foreclose anybody and get your property back until sometime mid next year. Yeah. Now, if you're a lender, that's a problem because they're not paying you and you can't realize on the collateral. So you have the new loans, you have to be smart. And those are the warning signs that you have to follow.
Yeah, the last, you call it 8-9 months have definitely, I guess 8 months at this point, definitely forced everybody on the lending side to throw out part of the old playbook and whiteboard a brand new playbook. So many things that hurdles we just did not have prior. The legislation that you mentioned, some that's working its way through, some that's already been enacted that creates significant hurdles on the lending side that we just have to adapt and overcome. So it's going to be interesting, especially on the election piece as well. I'm insanely curious to see how the Senate swings and the big race up top. We will see. It's good, but I share your optimism in that, like, we are going to be okay as a people. Like, I think we will be fine. We'll get through whatever gets thrown at us. We have for decades and centuries in the past. We'll be good.
Yeah, look, we are resilient. The American people are resilient, and there's no way this is going to beat us. It's just a matter of time, and we have to make smart decisions. We have to keep people employed. We have to keep them safe, and we will emerge again. We have the greatest country in the world with the most opportunities, and that hasn't changed because of COVID, and it's not gonna. And it's not gonna change no matter who's in the White House. Yeah. What I'd like to see, though, is people come together a little more, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see less chatter about coming out of the White House and more policy and execution. And either one who's elected, we will get there. I'm positive. I'm very optimistic about the next 4 years.